Hi there, welcome to Better Conversations Live. I'm Sehaam Cyrene, and in terms of today, I'm flying solo, but I want to have a conversation with you about the challenges and see if you recognize any of the things that I am going to be sharing with you today. And before I get to that, so if you are joining me live, say hello in the chat. I'll keep an eye out for that. And if you're watching the replay, then please do drop comments in the discussions below. And I do check those from time to time. So thank you for joining me. I am here Tuesdays, 1 p.m. UK time. You'll find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and you can also reach us via betterconversations.live. And time zone wise, you'll find us at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2 p.m. Central European Time, 5:30 India Standard Time, and on the east coast of Australia, it will be live at 10 p.m. But do join us at any time. Do check out some of the other interviews and shows that we've done, and follow me on LinkedIn to know when we're live. You can also subscribe to Better Conversations, and if you head on over to any of the links that will be in the description below, you'll be able to do that really easily. I am also interested in talking to leaders who have something they want to share, something that you think would be really invaluable to teach your peer leaders. Really interested, drop me a line either on LinkedIn or via BC Live at betterconversations.co, and we'll set up a chat and see what comes of the conversation. Always happy to kind of do a bit of prep as well with you to if it's your first time doing this and you're a little bit anxious about that. So yeah, do drop me a line on that. So in terms of today, I wanted to share with you something that I talk to a lot of leaders about, which is the challenges that they face for numerous reasons. It can be day-to-day stuff. It can happen in a crisis. And I want to talk to you and share with you a little bit about what that challenge is and how leaders who coach approach those challenges a little bit differently. So I'm going to be sharing with you a mix of sort of techniques, approaches, standpoints, and so on that I teach leaders on my course, Leaders Who Coach, and they have to practice with and get comfortable with until it becomes their own. So hopefully from today, you'll have a few things you can take away and experiment with, and that's another really important part of growing yourself as a leader is finding a comfort with experimenting. Things are going to go wrong, words come out funny, and the point is that these are all learning moments, and whilst they may sting in the moment or feel uncomfortable or land wrong, they give us ways of growing, learning moments basically. So I'm going to ask Heidi to pull up our first challenge, and this one is something that kind of, when I start conversations with leaders, we have to take a few steps back because we make a lot of assumptions in our conversations when we step into a conversation, even with people we've known for a long time, have worked with for a long time. From one conversation to the next, we are making assumptions that we are aligned on the same thing, that we see an issue in the same light, or we have the same set of data around it. And so often that's our starting point, making those assumptions. And then we may then from there either build on that conversation, we're trying to troubleshoot, move people along, delegate, or be directive. And our assumptions are not 100% accurate. And so what we end up with is things either not happening, dropping down the sort of to-do list. When we go back to our desk, we're like, that was an interesting conversation. Not really sure what its priority is, where it fits in. whether I really know where to start. And so that can often be the cause of why things don't happen the way we expect them to. We get surprises. We only find out later. So one of the things that I teach leaders who coach to do is to establish the purpose of a conversation, for example. What are we trying to get out of this conversation? What's your understanding of what we're about to talk about? And really taking that time at the beginning of a conversation to get all the pieces on the table. How have you seen it? What's your perspective on that? What are you aware of about this situation? And then sharing your perspective. Would you mind if I share what I'm seeing here? Because you may see things from a very different level. You may be privy to information that other person isn't, and vice versa. So it's really important to take that time to get everything out on the table and get clear about what are we talking about here? What do we need to achieve in this conversation? So that's something that leaders who coach learn to do. Because it really gives shape and strength to the conversation, to the next 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And if we don't do that, then things can quickly fall apart. It can feel very ambiguous. Okay, so that's challenge number one. Challenge number two that I see a great deal, and I see this among people who are stepping up into a more senior role. I see this with founders. I see this very much at the C level. And anyone who's, or even someone who's been the sort of architect or creator of something, and they're building out their team. Difficulty letting go. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more depth in another future session. But and when I ask people, how do you delegate? How do you do these things? Well, I think I delegate really well. But when we actually dig down a little bit, we establish some new awareness around, well, yeah, maybe I didn't do that piece so well, or maybe, yeah, we didn't really clarify and agree 100% on that one, or I left that one a little bit ambiguous and open to interpretation. So that's the difficulty when it, in delegating becomes much more difficult, and then later on accountability becomes hard. Not letting go is the other side of the coin. It's very easy to understand how when we are the creator of something, we have a really strong emotional attachment to the thing that we've created. And we see ourselves as custodians of what's been created. We want to safeguard the integrity of it. And so that, in combination with not having the strongest delegation skills, puts us in a really tight spot of letting go. We would rather step in, take ownership and do it ourselves than see the integrity of something being compromised. And the other challenge of that is very often we get labeled, or other people label us as control freaks. Really unhelpful label because it doesn't really get to the nub of the issue. We get stuck in this narrative of an individual being controlling and not letting go, when actually there's a richer conversation to have around that. And so one of the things that as leaders who coach learn to do is to get really clear about what it is they need doing. And then align with the individual, with their conversation partner, with their direct report, with their peer, about what that needs to look like. I need these things as absolute non-negotiable things that happen, whether that's quality, timeline, delivery, and so on. I need these things to happen for me to be able to let go of this and hand it over to you. But also another technique that we can use is actually to, if we're working with someone new and we're trying to build their capability, is to give them to do it in bite sizes and build up that trust over time. Let me see what happens when I delegate this piece of work to you. What do you do with that? Let's revisit that, have another conversation. How can I help you do that? What are your thoughts about improving it? And that establishes comfort in the leader's mind about, I know how you think. And I'm learning to trust that you approach things in a rigorous way. Might be different to me, but you approach it in a rigorous way, and we're aligned about the integrity of this thing. And so letting go, delegating becomes much easier. And I'm going to come to that a little bit later about why that's important from an accountability standpoint. So that's number 2. Hopefully some of these are resonating with you. I'm going to share with you at the end, if you're interested in Leaders Who Coach, more details around that at the end. But if you have any questions or any comments, or you have experienced any of these things, I'd be surprised if you didn't experience any of these challenges. But if you have any questions around it, please do reach out to me. So the third one is avoiding tough conversations. Again, I hear this a lot from leaders. I avoid conflict. I don't like to get into a difficult space with people. And this is a really mixed bag of emotions in terms of those tough conversations. Usually there's a high emotional charge around a knot that needs unpicking. And we may feel a little bit of guilt. Might sound strange, but we do sometimes feel a little bit of guilt because we question whether we set it up or we set them up to succeed well enough in the first place. So there's a sense sometimes of responsibility on our part that we didn't do that, and that feels a little bit uncomfortable, but a really important one to notice if that's how you're feeling, and just own it. I mean, no one's perfect. This is all about experimenting and iterating on how we're communicating. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is you might have some apprehension or anxiety about how the message might be received. Do you have a good relationship with that individual, or is it generally quite full of tension? Sometimes, we've always got someone who we start conversations with and we never hit it off. We always seem to get on a back foot. And for whatever reason, we trigger each other and we never seem to get past it. That could be another reason why we avoid having a tough conversation. And the third reason is often we just don't have the language, or we don't know how to get that conversation started. And then what happens? When I get the conversation started, what if they lose it? What if they get really upset? What if they challenge me and I'm wrong? And so leaders who coach learn to, first of all, accept that we make mistakes and they may have a part to play in why something turned out the way it did. But also that we learn by putting the individual at the center of the solution, the center of the conversation. Makes it much easier to step into our personal values and go, the right thing to do is to have this conversation with this person because they don't know. They need to know. It's part of their growth. And I can be compassionate, but I can be direct as well. And it's not entirely about my perspective. I'm going to give them space to kind of talk about it, because for them there might be some relief in someone actually bringing it up because they're stuck. So those are things that we learn as leaders who coach, is that there's no value in letting things continue. The sooner we get in there and have those conversations, and very often getting into those tough spaces done with the right sensitivity and attitude can really strengthen our relationship with that individual. So and that can be rich. And if you think about some of the most pressured times of your own work, when you've worked long hours, you've been through tough times with your team, it's actually quite bonding. But it requires some input and investment in terms of owning what's really going on there. All right, so that's challenge number 3. Challenge number 4 in terms of leadership, and I touched on it a moment ago, is letting underperformance drag on. It's kind of related to tough conversations, but sometimes there isn't really a tough conversation. It's just that there's a stretch for that individual, and they're not, for lots of different reasons, they're struggling to meet that. Sometimes it might be a misalignment of expectations. Maybe they don't know they're supposed to deliver something. Maybe they don't know that they're supposed to check in with you and give you a quick update. Maybe they're not seeing how their work is impacting other people. This can happen with someone who's kind of new into the workforce, or where they're in a stretch. You've given them a stretch assignment, so they're sort of learning with a steep learning curve around their role and the tasks that they're responsible for. But it can also be people who have been in the role for quite some time, have checked out. Maybe they are just not as passionate as they once were. Maybe they've got things going on in their personal lives that mean they are just distracted at the moment. Lots of reasons, and obviously you don't need me to tell you, but the impact of underperformance can be massive on you, on the team, on a client, on working with partners, and so again, it's one of the things that I hear is, how soon do I step in? I know something is wrong, but I kind of hope that it will work out. I like to give them second chances, maybe third chances. And the question to ask is really, what's at risk here for both the individual, the team, and our organization? And if we can see it in that light, then we can actually move forward with that tough conversation and just organize it. Hey, I'm noticing that, the past couple of weeks, we've been misaligned. What's going on? Can you share with me what's on your mind at the moment? Is there something getting in the way? Is there something that I haven't clarified? Or is there some support that you need, that we need to ask for? So learning how to be in the conversation, and again, not make the assumption that they are just being lazy, or they don't care, or they're looking for another job. Let's get in there and have that conversation to reconnect with them emotionally. We've got to create that safe space for them to articulate what it is. The conversation really has to be inviting. If you think about yourself, who would you share what you're struggling with? Someone you're emotionally closer to and trust, or someone you don't have much of a connection with? And so that's a really important aspect, especially as many of us are working remotely at the moment. This can feel like an even more sort of intangible thing, really hard to pin down what's going on. We may be having tactical meetings, but we're not really having some of those deeper conversations and heart-to-hearts, and just asking the question, hey, I'm just noticing things don't seem to be adding up for you right now. How can I help? Where shall we start? And what support do you need? So and do it sooner rather than later. And if you are having those conversations where you are contracting, you're absolutely clear about what needs to be done. You're aligned on, the targets, deadlines, consequences. Then this conversation actually is much easier. We don't need to let things drag on. And so that's something that leaders who coach learn to actually feel a greater sense of control around, because they're getting to those points less and less. There are events that happen infrequently because they are stepping in much earlier into that sequence. Related to that is challenge number 4, is when it gets personal, or making it personal. So I mentioned that emotional charge around things not going well, especially under pressure, when we're tired, when we're a bit burnt out. We're working with people in intense environments. And if you're doing back-to-back meetings, remote meetings, we are really putting our system under quite a lot of stress, and we have to acknowledge what's going on there. And therefore it's really easy to trip over into that emotional charge increasing, making it really personal. I don't know what's going on with you. We don't, because I'm not seeing you, I'm not having that physical synchronization going on, that mental synchronization. And so that can feel even scarier as a topic or a space to get into. And I've done it. You sit with something, you stew on it, it becomes this massive thing in our minds. And actually, a conversation about it might reveal that it's not big a deal as we thought it was. But we get caught up in all of those things I mentioned earlier, feeling a little bit of guilt, feeling angry, feeling resentful. Why haven't you told me that this wasn't working? That's really unhelpful. You're making my job difficult. And so in those ways, things become personal. Also, we may be very matter of fact around our job, and we don't make things personal. But for the other individual, it is personal. And so leaders who coach can recognize that, make that distinction. Okay, for us, I'm very matter of fact about it. I like you sparring with me. I like you challenging my point of view. But for the other individual, that may be a big no-no for lots of different reasons. And they may not know that about you. They may feel like there's not enough of an emotional connection. They wouldn't dare go there with you. So there are so many, conversations are complex and our relationships are complex. And learning as leaders who coach you, we learn to listen for and make those distinctions and tease apart what's really going on here. What is it that I'm feeling, and how am I getting that confused with what they may be feeling, or am I missing what they may be feeling? So learning to listen for their use of language, hesitations, their body language, things that they do or don't do, how they interact with others. Those are all things that leaders who coach learn to do that informs them and gives them sort of some evidence of a kind that avoids us getting into that space of making it personal. All right, so that's 5. We've got another 3 more to go. Again, just a reminder, if you have any questions about this or anything that I've spoken about and you want to learn more, reach out to me. My contact details and how to get in touch will be in the descriptions and for sure on the website. So if you have anything here that you think, yeah, I'm dealing with that right now, Sehaam, please get in touch. I'd love to learn more and talk it through with you. Okay, so number 6, challenge number 6, telling people what to do and jumping to solutions. Usually it comes from a good place, that our direct report might come to us with a situation, and we, having gone through it ourselves or done that task before, find it, we want to help them. We're eager for them to succeed. And so very often it comes from a good place of saying, hey, I've done that. Here's what you need to do. Hand in hand with that is when someone comes to us and they share a problem, we often can jump straight into solution mode. Well, here's what you need to do to fix it. Both of those, I'm going to say, come from a good place. And you're in the role that you're in because you've got experience. So first of all, let's acknowledge that you do have experience. The thing that I'd like you to challenge you on thinking about is, does telling them what to do grow them? Does it help them to think independently? And I would say that the simple answer is not really. Obviously, if you're in a crisis situation, you have got fires to put out, you have to be more directive. And that's what it requires, and there will always be moments when that's necessary. But at all other times, I would encourage you to just sit with that individual for a little bit longer and invite them to articulate more of what they see the problem as being, and also what thoughts they've had around how they might tackle that. Now, leaders who coach, when they first start doing this, they realize they have this massive impulse to tell someone how to fix it. And so drawing back from that and pulling away from that urge is probably one of the first areas that leaders who go on my course learn to do. And it's very noticeable. They're very aware of how much it's actually happening for them and how difficult or how much they have to remind themselves not to do that. But once they've gone through a few cycles of doing that, they learn that actually there's massive value, because the individual in front of them just blossoms, starts thriving, can thrive, because they probably have been sitting with the issue for quite some time. They may have some ideas about it. And if they don't have ideas about it, then our role is to get to that point of understanding. Do they have the experience and they don't have the experience? I'll come back to that in a moment. Telling people what to do is actually disempowering. So jumping straight into that, telling someone what to do, creates this dependency on ourselves as leaders, which is really unhelpful. And I hear a lot of leaders saying, I don't have time to think. I really need to be more strategic. I don't have time to do that. I just find myself responding to problems. This is the problem, is we've built this dependency on ourselves to have the answers, to give the answers. And we haven't encouraged and fostered independent thinking and confidence of the individual in front of us to come up with a solution. And so it takes away an element of self-control or power or self-advocacy from the individual. And so we end up creating unintentionally this bottleneck. Like I said, it comes from a good place to want to help that person move forward. But people have to go through their own journey of learning. And as a leader who coaches, you're there to guide them, help them stress test their ideas and course correct, and resist the urge to tell them what to do, because they've got to figure that piece out for themselves. And the other important point about it is the accountability that creates. When an individual is designing a solution, there's a physiological and brain process that happens, which is basically we get more attached to the ideas we've been party to creating. We become more attached to the ideas we've been party to creating. And the more attached we are, the more likely we are to follow through and undertake that task and own it. And that makes accountability way easier, because they actually start to hold themselves accountable. There is an integrity that all of us sort of carry about the quality of our work, our competence, whether we're valued and so on. And so allowing an individual the space to come up with the solutions and support their thinking is a massive win in terms of creating a culture of accountability, in terms of building the capability and confidence of that individual and having them ready to step up into more challenging roles in more challenging projects. So and it's a brilliant sort of switch when people do make that change, and people talk about the leaders who've graduated, talk about, I no longer see myself as having to need to do this, and it's quite draining and it's quite stressful for us as leaders to feel like we've always got to have the answers, and much more rewarding to see an individual thrive and be a source of the solution. Rather than just a doer, but someone who actually contributes and can make something better. So maybe that's something that you might think about in your next conversation, is just to say, okay, so what have you thought about doing, and where do you see the challenges, and what would the consequences of that be? So if we played that out to its logical conclusion, what would happen? What's going to get in the way of you being able to do that? Who do you need to talk to? What's the ask that you need to make for that to happen? So these are the kinds of spaces that we end up being in. And when we want to give some advice, we can do that once everything's been laid on the table. And you can see where the gaps are, where the opportunities may be to contribute. Again, I'm going to talk about that in another session as to how you might do that. But that will do, I think, for that challenge. Let's move on to the next one. Not knowing what your people are capable of. This really comes down to knowing beyond, once you've hired someone, actually spending time with them to understand who they are as a person. What's valuable to them? How do they prioritize things in their life? What have their experiences been, and why did they make those choices? And where do they want to go? Where do they want to take their interest and their passion? And how can you facilitate that for them? I hear a lot of leaders say, yeah, I have catch-ups with my direct reports. Yep, we meet every week, or we meet once a month. But when we get into what does that look like? Very often one of two things happen. They either are very tactical, they're very much more status updates. What are you working on next? How are you going to prioritize what's coming up? Or they do start out as growth meetings, and then they quickly either fall away, stop happening, or they become tactical meetings again. And part of that is that sense of, well, what do we talk about? What are we going to get into? And the reason that this is such an important part of being a leader who coaches is, if you know, it's actually a very strategic thing that you should know as a leader. I see it as a responsibility. If you're in that role, you need to know this. Knowing what your people are capable of gives you a window onto your horizon in terms of the skill set on your team. Where your gaps are as a team, where the obstacles might be, or the things that might be getting in the way, because you don't know what your team or members of your team might be able to contribute, or we haven't invested enough in developing them. And so very often, if you're trying to go through change, deliver a complex project, you're trying to scale, you really need to know what each member of your team is bringing and where they want to head to. Otherwise, you've got a risk on your team. You don't know enough about what your team is capable of, where you could go, what you could say yes to as a project or as an organization. Or you say yes to something and you actually put your team under massive pressure or burnout to deliver something that's really a big stretch in a short space of time. So knowing what your people are capable of is a strategically important aspect of your role as a leader, because it allows you to forecast and project and think about growing what you, the team and the organization, can deliver to customers, to clients. And so making the mistake of thinking that because you meet on a regular basis, you're actually stepping into that space of learning what your direct report is interested in. Really get clear about that. Be honest with yourself and ask, do we tend to actually do more tactical type conversations, and not really how you might grow? What's the next challenge? What's the next opportunity? Where could I put you next? Who do you need to speak to? So that is a big, important strategic focus. It's something that we cover in the 4th competency within Leaders Who Coach, which is all about the capability and capacity of your teams. So that's when we actually get to put into practice everything that we've been doing up to that point. Okay, we're there. That's at number 7. Number 8, our final challenge. There are lots of challenges. These are the things that I see as the most common ones, and ones that I'm in conversation with a lot with leaders, whether it's one-to-one coaching or through the cohorts of leaders who coach. So hopefully something in there so far has been useful to you and maybe has given you a different perspective of how to think about maybe a situation that you're facing currently. All right, number 8, not contracting or negotiating in conversations. Sometimes conversations are just, very loose and light, and they're just touch points, a way of staying connected with people. There is no big agenda. Those are fine. In terms of delivery and operations, and day-to-day work and meeting targets, this is an area that I think there's a great deal of improvement to be had in understanding when is actually contracting and negotiating needed and happening in a conversation. And in a bigger conversation another time, if you want to have with me, I would say that these things, contracting and negotiating, need to be are actually happening all the time. I need something from you in a conversation. I need you to listen to me. I'd like you to acknowledge what I've done. I'd like you to notice. I'd like you to ask me a question. These are all forms of negotiation. I'm wanting something from you. How do I get it? I want time with you. How do I get that time with you? And negotiating and contracting are closely tied. Now, there is, if you're pure sort of negotiating, you need to understand what the other party is looking for, what they need, what they want, to put you in the best position. But if we don't know that, we just need to ask, what is it? What can I tell you, or what do you need to hear that will give you the information or help you move forward with X? Very often we can get caught up with ourselves about, I should know, what is it? I want to help. I want to improve things. What am I missing? What am I not seeing? The person who can have that information really easily is the person in front of you, the person you're having a conversation and a dialogue with. Simply ask them, what do you need? How can I help you? That is part of the negotiating. So if we're stuck and we don't know what needs to happen or what they're looking for, and the same with contracting, here's what I need you to do, and it needs to look like this. That way I have peace of mind, and you know exactly what's expected, and we know what getting stuck looks like, what going off the rails looks like, and then I can be a better support to you. You're better positioned to be able to come to me and ask for that help, or know who to go to and ask for that help. And the reason that this is a challenge is it comes out in the form of a lot of leaders talk about accountability. I can't hold my people accountable. They don't seem to value this piece about accountability, or we have different definitions of what accountability looks like. And why is it so hard to get people to do their job? Why is that so hard? Why can't they just do it? Why isn't it obvious? And then we get into that space of it being difficult. It becomes personal, tensions build. We don't know how to get into the conversation. We don't know how to unpick that knot. We let things slide until they become really uncomfortable and become a bigger problem. And it comes down to this piece about contracting and negotiating. We're all negotiating. There's something that I need from you, and there's something you need from me. So what is that? Let's get everything on the table and figure out what that is. How can we both get something from this that supports us moving forward? Often as leaders, we need some assurance and peace of mind. So how are you going to get that? How are you going to ask for it from your direct report? And so that's really helpful to them to understand, what do you need? How can I make sure I'm delivering something to the standard in the way that you like it to be delivered? How many updates do you need? Can we agree that if I provide it in this format, you'll leave me to just get on with it my way? So there are lots of ways of getting into a conversation, and have really rich conversations about how can we meet each other's needs, and how can we diminish some of these challenges into something that is something we can both get into and have a conversation about. So I hope that's helpful. I could talk on and on and on about many of these things. If you're interested to learn more, reach out to me. In terms of the course, if you're interested in learning more about leaders who coach, you can pop to that place, leaderswhocoach.today, or go to betterconversations.co. Both ways will get you there. And you'll find details about the course curriculum. You'll find out what other leaders who've graduated from the course have said about their experience and their journey, and lots more. I won't get into that now, but it's all there if you want to just sort of have a browse and figure out whether that's something you're interested in. Also, if you are interested in for your leaders, we also offer cohorts, for private cohorts for your leadership teams, whether that's at the C level, 1 below, 2 below, or team leads. If building a good, strong culture and embedding great conversation skills and having those leaders model them so that they trickle through and are really embedded within the organization, then you might want to think about actually enrolling a cohort of leaders within your organization so that all the conversations stay within the context of what your business is trying to do, what your team is trying to do. Again, you can find out more about that at leaderswhocoach.today or betterconversations.co. And that's pretty much it in terms of the leadership challenges and skills. I am really open to conversations if I can help you in any way. If you've got any questions about what I've shared today, and want to organize a quick chat, all the details for finding me will be listed for you. And next week, I'm going to be talking about when and how to give advice to your direct reports. This comes up is actually coming up with a couple of cohorts at the moment. They're asking me, isn't coaching about, not giving advice to people, but more about letting them come up with a solution? I have a slightly different take on that, which is that in your position as a leader and given your experience and knowledge, you do have a value to actually share some of that knowledge. The trick is not to disempower and not to take away control from the person that you're talking with or that you're in conversation with. So yes, you can give advice, but it's how you do it that builds that individual's confidence and their ability to kind of troubleshoot without you. So that's what I'm going to be getting into next week. If you're interested in that, do join me. That will be Tuesday next week at 1 p.m. UK time, in the usual spots. And follow me on LinkedIn if you want to know when that goes live. That's it. That's what I have for you today. Any questions? I'm always ears here, willing to listen, willing to hear. See you next week.